Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, Travis Dermott has re-signed on a one-year, $874,000 deal with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Travis Dermott is an interesting player, and he's one that perplexes a lot of people in the fan base because he's 23 years old, going to be turning 24 this December, and ever since that 17-18 season, his rookie season, he hasn't really taken a step forward, and it almost looks like he's taken steps backwards in his development. But if we're looking at these heat maps for Travis Dermott's career over the course of the last 3 seasons, the top ones being the offensive zone, the bottom ones being the defensive zone, the negative numbers there in the defensive zones are good. The lower that number is, the better. So maybe his offensive game has taken steps back over the last 3 seasons, but his defensive game is improving. And that's highlighted here on evolvinghockey.com when you're looking at the expected even strength defensive number here over the past 3 seasons. It's gone up. There's a lot of Leaf fans that would prefer having Rasmus Sandin in the lineup over a guy like Travis Dermott, and you know what? I understand why. Rasmus Sandin has a much higher overall ceiling than what Travis Dermott does, but at this point in their careers right now, Travis Dermott is the better defenseman. And not just by a little bit, it's quite a bit. Especially when you're considering that Rasmus Sandin needs power play time in order to get the full value out of him, and Travis Dermott does not. Travis Dermott took steps into developing into a penalty killer, and Rasmus Sandin is not at that point yet in his development. So I don't really think it's fair to compare these guys and say one of them deserves a spot in the lineup over the other, because they're just very different stylistically. But don't you worry, we're going to talk about Rasmus Sandin and where he fits into next year's team in just a bit. He's going to be playing a fair amount of games next year. So when talking about the roster next season, I'm going to be bringing up this quote from James Myrtle from Kyle Dubas. Dubas says that he doesn't anticipate needing to shed any more players to create cap room, says the Leafs may use 20-player roster at times this year. So what I'm getting from that is that Kyle Dubas is not going to be doing any more Kasperi Kapanen, Andreas Janssen type deals where the return is mainly for picks, prospects, and cap space. The wording of this quote is very specific. He doesn't anticipate needing to trade any more players to create cap space, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to deal anyone else off of this roster in what could be a hockey trade to make the team better now. So they talked about possibly using a 20-man roster at different points of next season, and this is an example of that. And this 20-man roster would feature the Leafs playing with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen. And the reason why you would do that is because Zach Bogosian isn't necessarily the best player at 5-on-5, but he excels on the penalty kill, and you really do want his grit and toughness in the lineup as much as you can possibly fit it in there. So this would allow the Maple Leafs to play their best 6 defensemen at 5-on-5 and still have Bogosian in there to kill penalties and provide that extra grit and toughness if they feel that they're falling behind in the game and need some physicality to spark them. And Jimmy Vesey and Jason Spezza, the 10th and the 11th forwards here, would mix into the top 9 and give one of these guys a break every once in a while. And I touched on it in one of my more recent videos, but I'll just go over it again right now. Basically, this is just a mashup of everyone that would require waivers in order to send them down. And it really does depend on what happens with the American Hockey League this season, but Chris Johnston on one of the more recent editions of the Steve Dangle podcast saying that the American Hockey League could be traveling with the NHL. So the Toronto Marlies would be going on road trips with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they would play the affiliated teams. So if the Maple Leafs were in Vancouver to take on the Vancouver Canucks, the Toronto Marlies would also be playing the Utica Comets in Vancouver. And if you have your American Hockey League team with you constantly, there's no need to keep healthy scratches on your NHL roster. You can just call them up as you need them. If you're playing a back-to-back game, if there's an injury, if there's 3 games in 4 nights, 3 games in 5 nights, you just want some fresh legs out there, they're going to be right down the hall in the same hotel as you. And the advantage of carrying a 20-man roster is it allows the Maple Leafs to have as much cap space as possible, because in-season cap space is different than off-season cap space. Because as the season progresses, players are paid out a salary, and what happens to their cap hit is it becomes less and less as the season goes on because they've already been paid out a portion of that money. So that $1.5 million on day one of the season is not the same as that $1.5 million, let's say, at the trade deadline. And if you save it and bank it, then it accumulates and you're able to have more flexibility come the trade deadline and add more and more assets to your team. But I do believe that their best lineup looks something like this. I do think that Pierre Engvall needs to eventually be on the team and will be on next year's playoff team, and I do believe that he makes them better. And I know there's a lot of numbers on the screen right now, but I'm going to try to navigate this the best way that I possibly can. These are forwards on the penalty kill, and there's 154 of them ranked here that have played at least 60 minutes. And 60 minutes because Pierre Engvall's played about 64 or so on the penalty kill, and that's not his fault. He only got into about 48 games last season. They called him up about halfway through. But he ranks 25th here in terms of goals against per 60. And in terms of expected goals against per 60, so factoring in scoring chance quality, Pierre Engvall ranks 3rd on the penalty kill here. He also ranks 3rd best here on the penalty kill in terms of scoring chances against per 60, and a scoring chance would be counted as inside the home plate area that they're always highlighting on the broadcast. And in terms of high danger Corsi against, so Corsi against just high danger shot attempts against per 60, Pierre Engvall ranks 15th among these forwards as well. Even if this is against second power play units, that is still a good penalty killing forward. He's not really going to catch your eye very much offensively, although the first half of his season, he was a decent offensive player. The second half was absolutely abysmal, but he is one of the Maple Leafs' better defensive forwards. He skates decently. He's a decent defensive forward. He can play center in a pinch on your 4th line. 3rd line would be kind of pushing it. He's best off on the wing if you're going to play him in the top 9. But this is a useful player, and the Maple Leafs would be really missing out if they don't have him in the lineup. It might not happen to start the season due to cap constraints. Mark my words, I am willing to die on this hill. Pierre Engvall is not being traded, and he will be on the Maple Leafs come playoff time next season. There's just absolutely no reason to trade Pierre Engvall. Even on a 21-man roster here, you can send Pierre down to the American Hockey League because he is exempt from waivers. It would cost you $175,000 against the cap, but you still have over $400,000 in cap space. Why are you going to trade a guy just for the sake of trading a guy? You're not going to get anything for him. He can play center. He can play on the penalty kill. Keep this player. The Maple Leafs could very well start this upcoming season with the 20-man roster, over $1.3 million in cap space, and all of these players that are exempt from waivers that you can just call up and send down as many times as you want. I know Nick Robertson is not eligible to play in the American Hockey League currently. He would need to go back to the Ontario Hockey League, but I think because of what's going on right now with the Ontario Hockey League, that the NHL is going to step in there, and there is going to be an exception made for players like Nick Robertson to play in the American Hockey League next year. You have cap space, you have depth, you've improved the blue line, you've added some grit here, you have your 1st round pick in next year's draft, you have all the prospects that you've accumulated over the last couple of seasons, you've handled the backup situation going into the season. In fact, Aaron Dell is the 3rd string goalie, and he's better than most teams' backup. All that's left is for these guys to actually perform on the ice. And if they run into a couple of bumps, the Maple Leafs are more than equipped, like I said, with the cap space, the 1st round pick in this year's upcoming draft, and all the prospects that they've accumulated and the depth that they have to really add at this year's trade deadline if they need to. I am very, very excited for this upcoming season. The only problem is that nobody has any idea when it's going to start. But let me know down in the comment section, because I know more than half of you are going to disagree with me on most of the things that I said in this video, because I did take some harsher stances with a couple of topics. But let me know which your optimal lineup looks like if you want to make your own armchair GM, and leave the link to it published in the comment section. I am going to be doing another reacting to armchair GMs pretty soon. I talked about it more in depth in the video that's going to be coming out tomorrow afternoon, where I looked at how the Maple Leafs stack up in a potential all-Canadian division. But I basically said that the Maple Leafs will go as far as Frederik Andersen can carry them, and this feels very similar to the 16-17 season in that sense. So make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And guys, remember, the Leafs are only going to go as far as Frederik Andersen can carry them. It's just a matter of how much faith in the guy you have.